the first abbot of KTD, would train students, and how he asked us to train students in the Karmakaju lineage. So we're going to go through some more of that today. We're going to start with the Vajrayana and talk a little bit about Vajrayana practice and study. But before we do that, it's good to start with prayer. So we're going to I'll bring up the prayers, and we'll start with a set of prayers, including the Karmakaju lineage supplication, which hopefully I'll be explaining here in a little while. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right. Doje chan chen te lo na ro dang marpam hi la chu je kam po pa du sum she ja kun kien karma pa je shi chen je ju ba zin na dang Drita tsao sum pal den drupaso sablam cha cha che lang ha nye pe nyame drogun da po ka jula so adep so ka ju lama dang Jupa no nam tar chin ji lo shen lo gong ki kang par sum pa shen se nur kun la cha shen mei pa dang se dir tu ta chu pe gong chen la Ne kurjem pa me arjin jilo mugu kom ki go war sung passion me nga ter go che pe la ma la jundu so wa de pe gong chen la Chimi mugu ke war jin ji lo yang me gong gi ngu shir sun pa shen gang shar to pe ngo wo so ma de ma chu de ka jo pe gom chen la gom ja lo dan ra war jin ji lo nam to ngo wo chu kur sum pa jen chi yam ha yin chir yan char wa la Magaro parchar we gom chen la Lord yer me do parchin jilo ke wa kun tu yang da la ma dang Drao mei chu ki pa la long chu ching sa da lang ki yen ten rab so ne dor je chang gi go pan yur to sho dor je Chang he go pan your to show. Okay, next we'll recite the prayers taking refuge and engendering the Bodhisattva attitude. These will be recited 3 times. O Sanje Chudang Sochi Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinso Jipe Sunamki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho Sanjay Chudang Sochi Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinso Jipe Sunamki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho Sanjay Chudang Sochi Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinso Jipe Sunamki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho. Next, we'll recite the 4 immeasurable meditations, and this is recited also 3 times. O Semchen Tamche Dewa Tan Dewe Gyutan Dempar Gyurchik Dungao Tan Dungao Gi Jutan Drawar Churchik Dungao Mebe Dewa Tampa Tam Hindrawar Churchik Nerin Shantan Yidan Drawe Tonyan Chempola Nepar Churchik Semchen Tamche Dewa Tan Dewe Gyutan Tempar Gyurchik Dungao Tan Dungao Gi Jutan Trewar Churchik Dungao Mebe Dewa Tampa Tam Hindrawar Churchik Nerin Chantan Yidan Drawe Tonyen Chimpola Nepar Churchik Semchen Tamche Dewa Dan Dewe Gyutan Tempar Gyurchik Dungao Tan Dungao Gi Jutan Trawar Churchik Dungao Mebe Dewa Tampa Tam Hindrawar Churchik Nerin Chantan Yidan Drawe Tonyen Chimpola Nepar Churchik. And we'll end with the 7-branch offering prayer. Chaksalwadang Juchin Shapadang Jesu Yirang Kerjing Sohayi Gewa Chunze Dagi Jisapa Tamche Dagi Chanchu Chingo. Okay. Anyway, thank you again for being here today. This has been a really interesting and fun time for me because it gave me a chance to look back over the teachings that Rinpoche has given and to try to write down for everyone to enjoy the methods of Dharma training that he gave to us. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say a short prayer of my own, and then I'm going to give a short review of yesterday's program. O Palen Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chiwor Pede Den Shila Kajen Jembo Gone Je Sunte Kusum Tuking Udrup Saudu So. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Let's move to the next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about yesterday's program, just briefly, in case folks would like a brief recap. We talked about how difficult it was sometimes to understand and know how to practice Tibetan Buddhism because there's so many books, so many lineages, so many teachers and so many courses. In fact, there are probably more courses in Tibetan Buddhist programs today than ever in the past. So it's a little bit difficult. And in fact, one of our questioners yesterday was asking for some tips about working with all of these different programs, lineages, and courses. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I gave my personal story of how I met Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and how he taught us at Columbus Karma Thegsum Choling, the center that he founded in Columbus, Ohio. And then a little bit about how he gave us teachings when we began teaching Dharma after our 3-year retreat. This is one of my favorite pictures of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. It's the way I like to remember him now that he's passed away. I love this smile and I love his spirit and everything about him was skillful and wise. And when he introduced the Dharma to us, he made sure that he introduced the Dharma from the point of view of what you might call the ultimate meaning. One of his Dharma students said to me a few weeks ago, this was the one thing about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's style of teaching. He always talked about the two truths, the relative truth of how things appear and the ultimate truth of how things really are. He put those into every single program and talk he gave. He always spoke from the point of view of how to be in this world, in the relative world with all of its flaws and all of its problems, and how to see through the illusions of the relative world into the ultimate, which is the way of all things, emptiness and luminosity. So he introduced our Buddha nature to us in a talk in Columbus many years ago, his very first talk on Buddha nature to us. And he said, if you only knew who you really were and what you were capable of, you would be astonished and amazed. And he also talked about our Buddha nature as being a spark of goodness, a powerful potential for developing warmth, openness, tenderness, sanity, and an incomparable sense of well-being and richness that cannot be approached by material or physical wealth and comfort. I have a friend who likes this quotation so much that it's actually their sign off at the ends of all their emails. I also talked a little bit about the name of the center that was founded by the 16th Karmapa, Karmatriyana Dharmachakra, Karma being our family name because we are of the Karma Kagyu lineage led by the Karmapa. We talked a little about the Karmapa's history and so forth as a teacher and a lineage master. We talked about Triyana, or the 3 yanas, or the 3 types of teachings and practice, 3 vehicles of practice in Tibetan Buddhism. You remember I was saying that Khenpo Rinpoche said we could call Vajrayana Buddhism not just Vajrayana Buddhism, but 3 yana Buddhism because it teaches and practices all 3. Dharma chakra, we spoke about that as meaning the place, the chakra being the place, and the Dharma being the Buddhist teachings. So that's how we described. And Khenpo Rinpoche used the name Karmatriyana Dharma Chakra, which is in Sanskrit, and the affiliate centers are called Karma Thegsum Choling, which is in Tibetan. They have the same meaning. And he said that this would be a good way of describing our activity at our centers, that we are this place of the Buddha's teachings of the 3 vehicles. We talked a little bit about the Hinayana, which some people call the smaller vehicle because that's a literal name of Hina, but I prefer to call it the path of individual liberation, and where we ourselves are seeking liberation from the pain and suffering of cyclic existence, which the Buddha called samsara. And this path is based on the sutras, the words of the Buddha. The sutras, the 4 Noble Truths were what we discussed next. And we summarize the Eightfold Noble Path in 4 statements. Do no harm, practice virtue, and tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Since that last one's a summary, we just have 3 to remember. Do no harm, practice virtue, and tame your mind. And so at our Dharma centers, Rinpoche encouraged us to learn about Buddhist ethics. We discussed Buddhist ethics yesterday. And we also talked about the practice of shamatha, or calm abiding meditation. And I mentioned that each of these practices, ethics and shamatha, they inform the other. Our shamatha practice helps our mind to calm down so we can see our individual thoughts and feelings and emotions, and that allows us to have more ethical behavior, which in turn makes our shamatha more effective because our inner being is more at peace. Then, after that, we talked about the Mahayana, the path for the liberation of all. Again, also based on the sutras, the words of the Buddha. Shamatha practice begins the Mahayana for us at our center because it reveals our patterns, our mental patterns, and it awakens us to our own suffering and how we cause our own suffering in many cases. And also it awakens us to the suffering of others and how others, and in turn, also cause their own suffering. And Khenpo Rinpoche and told us that the very best way to practice the Mahayana was to learn something called lojong, or thought transformation. Sometimes it's called mind training. And so lo means refers to the mind, and jong refers to training. And the 7-point mind training, the 59 mind training slogans of Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, were the method he said was the best to learn. And the book he said was the best to learn from was the Great Path of Awakening, written by the Kagyu master Jamgon Khantrul the Great in the 19th century. Yesterday, we also discussed Tonglen meditation and did some sessions of Tonglen. And now today, that brings us to where we are now. We're going to start talking about the Vajrayana. And so we'll talk about that path next. But before we do, I'd like to invite everybody to have a short meditation. We're getting a little bit of feedback here. You might double check your microphone to make sure it's switched off. Let's see if we can figure out where the microphone problem is. Yes, I see one person is now. Thank you so much. Yeah, I noticed one person was unmuted. Yeah, thanks. What I tell people is that these are being recorded. So if you don't want sounds from your house to be on YouTube, anyway, you get the picture. Okay, so let's move along. Let's do a little bit of meditation. Let's see here. Okay. And so just to review the posture of meditation, we build the posture of meditation from the ground up, starting with excuse me, I just realized I don't have my gong, so I'm going to run and get it a second. I know, I love live broadcasting. I'll be right back. It's just across the room. Okay. So we begin building the posture from the bottom up. We start with the legs. And if you remember from yesterday's instruction, if you're sitting in a chair, your feet are flat on the floor, hip width apart. And if you're sitting on the floor, you can cross your legs in any of the various methods of crossing the legs. Your a seat, you can ground yourself on the seat in one of 2 methods. One is called the drawing up, which is tightening the muscles in the lower part of your body, the sphincter muscles and so on, and then relaxing. as a way of grounding yourself on your seat. Alternatively, you can rock from side to side and tuck in the muscles of the backside. That also grounds you on your seat. Shoulders, hands, and arms. You allow your hands to rest lightly in your lap. If you are using the Vajra posture, Rinpoche recommended that you use the gesture of equipoise, which you can then rest on your upturned feet. But if you're not sitting in the lotus posture or the Vajra posture, you can place your hands in the pose of Marpa, the translator, that he popularized, with the hands palm downward on the legs. In addition, remember we shared Khenpo Rinpoche's special method with the hands called the lion's pause, touching your thumb to the base or the first joint of the ring finger and closing the hand in a light fist and placing your hands palm downward on the legs. The shoulders are straight. The back is steady and straight. Chin tucked in slightly. Eyes cast downward, and the tip of the tongue is touching the upper palate behind the front teeth. The meditation session begins with an inner motivation, which is that you're going to be practicing meditation with the motivation to benefit all sentient beings. You start the meditation itself by taking one deep breath, breathing out, and then allowing the breath to come and go naturally, following the course of your breath with your mind's eye as it comes in and goes out. Yesterday, we spoke about the tradition of counting: in breath, out breath, mentally count 1, in breath, out breath, mentally count 2. And that is sometimes a help for people as they are getting started in meditation. So forming the mental motivation to practice for the benefit of beings, we're just going to sit for a couple of minutes. Okay. That was a short meditation. Um, Before I start with the material for today, I wanted to double check and see if anybody had questions about the recap or questions from yesterday that you didn't get to ask or anything else. So I just that way we can, if I have something to cover today, I'll be able to cover what you're interested in. Any, yes, Amy?
Um, so I noticed when we practiced Tonglen that there would be, and it was momentarily, but I did suppress, not, was not like a hard suppression, but it was like, oh, a negative thought that arose when we were practicing Tonglen. It was like, well, if those people didn't do that, we wouldn't have these, just a flash. And
Mhm.
so it's an opportunity to see how I perceive things. But
Mhm.
I also was curious, does it kind of mean you have to start back at zero for that session if you are not, if one does have a lot of negativity arise and should just sort of stop and maybe do shamatha or what? Because that does, I mean, over the years I've practiced various, so-called compassion meditations, but it also seems to be an opportunity to see where my negative thoughts are too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to make sure I understand. So let me ask you a question to clarify for myself. Is it, are you saying that when you were doing the practice of Tonglen meditation yesterday, you were meditating with a certain group of people in mind, but then you developed a negative thoughts toward the people you were meditating on? Or
no, no, it was just sort of this flash, non-specific, it sort of it was almost like a blaming. We have problems because people are ignorant and, because they're human, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's what samsara is. It
Yeah,
is this. And it was like, well, we wouldn't have samsara. And it wasn't like a train of thought. It was
I
just a
get.
flash. But I know what's behind it because I know my
Mm-hmm.
daily reactions to certain things and
Oh, sure.
so
Yeah.
so that came up, and all I'm trying to say is if we're not, perfectly calm and pure and loving, how does that affect our tonglen?
Oh, I get it. Okay, I understand. Now I understand. I really appreciate the clarification. I have a feeling that there are lots of other people who have this question, you know, because what I have found in working with people over this, over these years is that when one person has a question, like three other people have the same question. So I really appreciate you asking that because I think that we want to do the practice really well. We're really sincere and how we approach the practice. And I think that your question speaks to your sincerity, the sincerity you're bringing to the practice. You want to do it well. You want to be respectful of the practice. And I think that's awesome. And I want to invite you to think that the practice itself is being done because we have negative thinking. You know,
Got it.
kind of like, and I just want to invite you to consider this idea that, that the reason that we need to do Tonglen is kind of remedial to begin with.
Yeah.
You know what
Okay.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like Kemper Rinpoche said, we're not at this stage of the game, we're not capable of truly taking away the sufferings of others because we can barely take care of ourselves, right? But he didn't say it that way, but he was very kind. But but what he was getting at was that we are training our own attitude to
Yeah.
be more kind, to
It,
be more loving through doing the practice of Tonglen. So when you notice, I want to invite you to try something and then you can tell me how that works. Um, I'm wondering if it would be of interest to you when this flash comes over you. Oh, I'm sorry, before I give the instruction, I need to back up and say one more thing. Habitual thoughts that come up again and again, they will come up again and again until we stop feeding them. But
Mm.
you see what I'm saying? They will come up again and again until their pattern is kind of worn out. So those repetitive thoughts will just keep coming back again and again, even though we don't want them, because they're part of our sort of habitual tendencies that are part of our karma. And but each time we fail to turn them into a big hairy deal, every
Yeah.
time those little thoughts, like you're talking about, it's just like this moment of
Yeah.
negativity, we could let it blossom into this giant thing, story, whatever. But every time we fail to feed the beast,
Mhm.
it gets smaller
Mm.
and shorter and smaller and shorter. And there will always be topics about which we lose control. It's
Yeah.
always going to happen, right? But it all begins with these little moments of negative feeling and so forth. So I just wanted to let you know that these negative thoughts and feelings will probably keep coming up for a while, but we shouldn't be surprised because how many billions of lifetimes have we had
Mm.
in which we did not get enlightened? You know what I'm saying? So we've got a lot of habits to work through. So the technique I'm thinking of encouraging you to try is that when you're on your seat and doing Tonglen, Kemp Rinpoche said that the meditation should be brief. And here's what I think. I think the reason that he said that it should be brief is that otherwise we can become very discursive. Like this one guy came to me and he said, I'm trying to do Tonglen. I really am trying, but I keep thinking, what does that person really need? What about
Yeah.
that person? What kind of goodness should I give them? And I said, I think you're overthinking it a little here. It's better just to give them whatever they need and just let them figure that out.
Yeah.
So, because a lengthy practice of Tonglen can become very discursive, I tell people to start with doing it for only 5 minutes because, you're not supposed to be doing Tonglen for an hour. It's supposed to be a very brief meditation. So it has sincerity and I hate to use the word focus with meditation because I try never to use it, but it's like it's got something, it's got a point, right? It has a point.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing I would do is that the minute that you start with a short period, and then the minute this kind of flash happens to you, you just kind of like go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I know you. And then do Tonglen for that.
Oh, excellent. Yes,
You know
thank
what I'm
you.
saying?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I get you. Okay, here we're gonna do this now. So I take in this, negative feeling of mine, and I give myself and all beings who have those kinds of thoughts healing.
That's
And
good. And the idea of it being aspirational at this phase of my
yeah,
whatever. So, all right, great. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thanks. So,
Because what's really cool is that it slowly will become more. Because Rinpoche said, you start out not having a lot of compassion, maybe, or maybe it's misdirected, or whatever. But the more you do Tonglen, the more natural compassion you have, and it'll start to manifest and that sort of thing. So I really appreciate you asking that question.
well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank
Okay. Um, let's see. I've got a couple of comments. Let's see. Joseph feels so useful, very helpful to cover what and how to practice. Okay, it has something to find the ways. Oh yeah. Yeah, oh, okay. That was just a comment then from the one person. And then I think I understand. Yeah. Okay, very good. So let's see. Here's a question. Uh, uh, okay, so the questioner is saying, I received a high vibe tip. I'm gonna have to find out what that is. That's interesting. Yesterday on letting go and wonder what your thoughts on this might be and wanted to share. I thought it was very synchronistic. So the tip is as follows. The only reason letting go is hard is because we believe that if we let something go, it won't come back or it won't happen the way we want. The truth is, our attachment to the outcome is repelling that which we want because attachment causes resistance. Once we let go of the outcome, we free up that energy and allow it to come to us. Let go and trust the universe, which they said Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Yeah, you've mentioned what you brought up is really, really good. It's a really good point. And I think that this is like news you can use. The only reason letting go is hard is because we believe that if we let something go, it won't come back or happen the way we want. The truth is our attachment to the way that outcome is actually repelling that which we want because attachment causes resistance. And I think sort of my take on that is that when we are attached to something, we've actually created our level of disappointment. When we set an expectation on a person, on a situation, or whatever, we've like set the place, the level. We said, okay, I'm going to be disappointed right here, or here, or here, or here. We've set, when we have an expectation of somebody, that's been my personal experience. And basically the expectation is what is making it impossible to do and be, because we want something so much that we can't actually just be where we are and do what we do. And we can't be where we are and do what we do. And we can't be guided by our own inner nature. We're so busy trying to sort of second guess our Buddha nature. I mean, and so I really appreciate that comment. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have a question or a curiosity about today or yesterday? Okay, just making a note to myself here. All right, so then we'll go on to today's topic. All right. We started yesterday by saying that the word Vajra meant indestructible and Yana meant vehicle or path. And so it's the path of the indestructible. I call it the path of the indestructible nature, because the Buddha said we all have Buddha nature and that it is within us always, but that we don't necessarily have an awareness of it and don't necessarily nurture its uncovering and its development. Where if you can uncover your Buddha nature, this is the path to liberation from suffering. And so the Buddha gave a number of teachings on in the first two yanas, the Hinayana and the Mahayana, about how to purify negativities and gradually uncover our Buddha nature. But as one Lama put it in one of my teachers put it in a teaching, it takes several eons to clear of that much negative karma and that much confusion away with the methods of the Hinayana and the Mahayana. Whereas the methods of the Vajrayana are quicker because they relate to Buddha nature directly. In the way Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche put it, he said in the sutras, Buddha nature we as confused beings who have Buddha nature but are still confused. He said this, we're working with ourselves as a raw material that must be refined and refined and refined and refined until the Buddha nature shines forth. However, in the Vajrayana, we relate to ourselves as I guess you could say, an already finished product. And when we get into discussing the techniques of Mahamudra and mantra practice, you'll begin to see how these work exactly. So, in this way, by working with the Buddha nature directly, we can come to liberation, to an uncovering of our Buddha nature, and living from that Buddha nature a lot more rapidly. It's mostly about speed. I want to say something about the Buddha nature, the view of the Buddha nature in the Vajrayana. One time, His Eminence Taisita Rinpoche, when I and my group were in 3-year retreat, His Eminence Taisita Rinpoche came to visit us in retreat, and he gave us wonderful teachings. And one of the things he said was, he said, some people don't know that they have Buddha nature and aren't really able to entertain the concept. This is just, of course, paraphrasing the way he put it, but he said, you will get glimpses. And there's evidence and glimpses of the Buddha nature that you have in your everyday life. And he said, and one of those is your feelings when you're exposed to beauty or art. He said, when people are awed by nature or beauty or art or dance, or he says, if you can be touched and moved by something, this is evidence of the presence of Buddha nature within you. And that this, hopefully, this recognition that you have Buddha nature within you will be encouraging for you to continue the path and to deepen your practice. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And plus, I remember when Khenpo Tsotröm Gyaltsen came into our 3-year retreat and gave us some teachings. One of the people in the retreat was a student of his. And as you can imagine, 3-year retreat is not always easy. Sometimes it can be very difficult. And as Khenpo Tsotröm Rinpoche was talking, the person began to cry and began to weep. And he was sitting right next to the Rinpoche, and the Rinpoche patted him on the shoulder and said, "It's okay. That shows you have Buddha nature." So I love the idea that we will get these glimpses from time to time of the presence of Buddha nature within us. And because at first, the idea of Buddha nature is something that's sort of abstract until somebody tells us we have it, and then we have to cope. Like, we have to cope when we first find out about Buddha nature. It's like, wow, I can become a Buddha. And then, oh, I can become a Buddha. What will I do? How, how do I act? What do I do? What's the right approach? And I think that for a lot of us, it starts out like an intellectual idea, but then it becomes somewhat personal when we realize our teachers are counting on us to do something with what we have. And can we deal with that? Can we actually be that? And the answer is yes, we can be and do that. Maybe we can't be and do that like our teachers. Maybe we can't be what they are or even get close to being an iota of what they are. Maybe we don't have the diligence. Maybe we don't have the time. But Situ Rinpoche told us that everything we do in this life to take ourselves on the path toward awakening, he said, the good news is you get to keep that in your future life. He said, you don't lose it when you change lives, when one life ends and the next one begins. He said, you bring with you all of the karmic patterns from your previous life, including your habits of Dharma practice and the development that you had in your Dharma practice. You'll bring those with you. And that when you are then exposed to Dharma again, you'll be able to, in a way, he didn't say this in these exact words, he said, but you will be able to pick up where you left off. So I think that's a very encouraging thought. But I wanted to at least talk a little bit about glimpsing the Buddha nature, because what's going to happen as we discuss these two paths of the Vajrayana is that we're going to begin to see the methodology. And I think, and this way we're building on something that we already have maybe a tiny bit of confidence in, and that is that we have Buddha nature. The two paths of the Vajrayana. This comes from a teaching by the wonderful master who just passed away, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche. In one of his books, he talks about the two paths of the Vajrayana, the path of liberation and the path of skillful means. And the path of liberation, according to his definition, is the path of deep penetrating insight meditation, of which there are three main types in Tibetan Buddhism, but lots of subtypes. The three main types are the Great Middle Way, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen. And so these methods, Great Middle Way, Dzogchen, and Mahamudra, these are methods for meditating on mind itself, for being, because right now we use objects for meditation, such as our breathing, or perhaps a Buddha image or a visual object, or a sound. And we use these types of objects for our meditation. But when our shamatha meditation improves and we're able to meditate on a subtler object, we can begin to reflect upon and meditate upon mind itself, beginning with grosser methods of meditation and working to more and more and more and more subtle methods until one is left with working with one's own awareness. And these methods of meditation, I know mainly through the practice of Mahamudra. My own teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he felt that something he said was that when we came into the Dharma Center and new people would come into the Dharma Center during one of his talks, he'd say, because they'd ask him like, oh, hey, what kind of Buddhism should I study? What lineage should I practice? What should I do? And he said, your inner wisdom has brought you here this evening. Why don't you stay and see what we have to offer? Which I thought was an incredibly kind and generous way of saying, we'd like to help you. He said that we have an inner nature, a Buddha nature, and it's back inside of us. It's always inside of us. And sometimes it gets in the driver's seat and guides us in one direction or another. And we have to differentiate that kind of guidance from just having a passing intellectual interest in something, of which we will never come to the end. I have a couple of Dharma friends, and they are voracious readers and voracious learners. And it's really, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to keep them on task because there's just so many practices and so forth out there. But when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche taught us, he said, try staying with one lineage. Excuse me. Try staying with one lineage, at least at the beginning, so that you can get one set way of practicing, one set way of relating, one set group of practices that will help you. And he said, it's not like the Karma Kagyu lineage lacks anything that you have to go elsewhere to find. He said, we actually have everything you need. And so I'll get into that a little more in a minute or two, but because I'm getting slightly off topic myself. But I'll come back to this in a little bit, as to talk about his advice about all of the various courses and all of the various teachers and all the various empowerments and so forth that people can be receiving in Tibetan Buddhism, and what his view about all of that was. So let me go back to my topic, which is the path of liberation, Mahamudra. Khenpo Rinpoche, because he was born in 1924 in Tibet and trained in Tibet and began teaching in the West in the 1970s, he brought with him the instructions of the 16th Karmapa. The 16th Karmapa, Rangchen Rinpoche Dorje, sent Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche to the United States in 1976 with the purpose of establishing the Karma Triana Dharmachakra Monastery. And he also gave Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche a set of instructions. And the instructions he gave him were to establish the monastery, create Dharma centers, and teach the Mahamudra way of training. And so that meant that folks began their Mahamudra instructions with the four preliminaries, the four Mahamudra preliminaries. And so that was how Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche trained people in preparing for Mahamudra practice. He was following the directions of the 16th Karmapa, who gave him instructions on how to train the students. Karmapa said that he wanted Khenpo Rinpoche students to learn and practice the Nundro. In English letters, that's Ngondro, Nundro, which means preliminary, or that which goes before. And it consists of the four contemplations, which we discussed yesterday: the precious human life and impermanence and karma and the defects of samsara. Those are called the common preliminaries, but the uncommon preliminaries are the taking of refuge and the engendering of bodhicitta. That's the first. The second is the purification practice of Vajrasattva. The third is the offering of the mandala. And the fourth is the practice of Guru Yoga. And these four uncommon preliminaries are the ones that everybody hears about, the ones that are counted many, many times. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told us in 3-year retreat that all of these practices, the taking of refuge and the engendering of bodhicitta, which is can be accompanied by prostrations, and the Vajrasattva mantras and so on. He said these practices, he said, used to be given by teachers to their students on an individual basis. And the teacher would have the student do the practice for however many days, weeks, or months until they experienced signs in their dreams or in daily life that they had accomplished the purpose of that preliminary. Because the refuge and bodhicitta preliminary and the Vajrasattva preliminary are both about purifying negative karma from our past. And Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that when we go to try to meditate on the nature of mind, it's a very subtle practice and not an easy practice. And so we need to remove any obstacles we might have to doing this practice. And so the first two preliminaries are especially aimed at purifying negativities of body, speech, and mind. And so Rinpoche said, however, when the 3-year retreat was established, and he didn't tell me when this was, but the text we use today to guide our Nundro practice was written by the 9th Karmapa, who lived, I believe, in the 1600s. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to go back and look up my history. But the 9th Karmapa wrote the Nundro text we use today, as well as the Mahamudra instruction manuals that we use today, of which there are 3 main manuals and many sub-manuals written by great masters such as Seli Natsarandral and others. And so there's so many Mahamudra instruction books, but all of them include the Mahamudra Nundro, some form of it. And so what Khenpo Rinpoche said was that when the 3-year retreat was created, everyone had to do the 4 preliminaries, and they all had to finish at the same time. They had to begin them at the same time, and they had to end them at the same time so that the retreat could progress. So there was no more room for waiting until a student showed signs of accomplishment. They had to pick a very large number, he said. So they picked 100,000 as the number of repetitions for these 4 extraordinary preliminaries: 100,000 refuge recitations, 100,000 Vajrasattva recitations, 100,000 offerings of the mandala, and 100,000 Guru Yoga repetitions. And he said they just picked a big number because they figured surely by then some benefit will have been had by the individual. In the modern day, many teachers have come to the West, and different teachers have their students approach Mahamudra in different ways. And but I needed to explain that this particular method of doing the four common preliminaries as contemplations, and then the four uncommon preliminaries as 100,000 repetitions, came from the 16th Karmapa's instruction to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche on how to guide his students. And so I was asked yesterday, what about people whose teacher doesn't have them do Nundro? That's fine, no problem at all, because you have the blessing of your teacher. Absolutely, you have the blessing of your teacher. So if you see, here's the thing, Rinpoche said, if your teacher tells you to do something and you do it, then he said you have an instant blessing because of your connection to your teacher. It makes what you do more powerful because the teacher has asked you to do it. So if your teacher says Nundro is not necessary for you, well, then it's not necessary for you, and it's fine to do your practice without it. And because I remember there were several masters who came to the West, and that's how they trained their students. They had them go straight into Mahamudra practice. But here's my little additional thing. If a person is doing the Mahamudra practice in any way, shape, or form, and they hit obstacles while they're doing the practices, or they lose their way, or they don't know what to do, I had some really good advice given by Khenchen Trongpa Rinpoche, who said if a person hits a snag in their Mahamudra practice, they will benefit greatly if they go back and study let's see, I got it and I put it down, the Great Path of Awakening. He said if they go back and deeply study the 7-point mind training, including the meditations that are in here, of which there are, I think, 4 different meditations in the book. The Guru Yoga, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma, ultimate bodhicitta meditation, and relative bodhicitta meditation. He said if they go back and completely restudy the 7-point mind training, he said that will refresh their minds and remove their obstacles, and they can go back to their Mahamudra practice again, which I thought was a really valuable piece of advice. Plus, many people who are doing Mahamudra practice will also do a practice from the path of skillful means. And the path of skillful means includes the practice of mantra and visualization. Sometimes it's called deity yoga. One of the best books written about this is not in my stack here, but over on that shelf is Creation and Completion by Trongpa Rinpoche. And again, this will all be on the book list. I put on the course page either tomorrow or the next day. So in the book Creation and Completion, the Trongpa Rinpoche talks about the path of skillful means and the path of liberation working together side by side, because the practices of mantra will help the practice of Mahamudra, and the practice of Mahamudra will help the practice of mantra. And actually, they're pretty much alternating rungs on the ladder. They help each other. And so the reason that it's very interesting. Most of the time, the path of skillful means is described as a yogic discipline, such as the 6 yogas of Naropa and so forth, which the 16th Karmapa told Khenpo Rinpoche he could teach, but only in the strict retreat of the 3-year retreat. But a deity yoga, that's easy. That's easy to teach and can be practiced by anybody. And so what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told me about mantra practice was, he said, for the Mahamudra practitioner, he said, mantra practice serves the same function as the Nundro did for them, which is that it clears away obstacles and obscurations, purifies negative karma, and accumulates merit. Because when Khenpo Rinpoche was talking to us, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was talking about the purpose of the 4 extraordinary foundations. he was saying that that is their function. So they clear away obstacles and accumulate merit. He said, which is really necessary for the practice of Mahamudra. Now I'm going to tell you a funny story about something that someone said to Rinpoche. Um, a person, people would come to Rinpoche's public talks or his 10-day teachings in the summer and come up to the question microphone and ask the most interesting questions. Really, really interesting questions. And let me see if I can remember this one exactly. The person said, I've been practicing Mahamudra for 5 years and I have had no benefit. What should I do? Nothing's happened, is basically what they said. I've been practicing Mahamudra for 5 years and nothing's happened. What am I doing wrong? And Rinpoche was incredibly diplomatic and very kind, but he was a little definite. He said, he said, a lot of people ask me this question. And he says, and when people ask me this question, I have two thoughts. He said, one thought is, how much cushion time have they actually put in? In the 5 years that a person has been practicing meditation, does this mean they've done an hour a day for 5 years? Or that they've done 5 hours a day for 5 years? How much? He said, so I asked myself, how much cushion time did they actually put in? And he said, because that can have an impact on your success. But he said, the other thing I think about, he says, when people come to me and say that their Mahamudra practice has not been fruitful, he said, I kind of think it's a merit problem, he said. I think it's a merit problem. He said, because you need a lot of merit in order to approach and do practices like Mahamudra. So it's very helpful for Mahamudra students to accumulate a lot of merit. And so this is why some people, he said, continue when they finish all of their 100,000 repetitions. If they don't take on a deity practice after that, he said they continue doing a few repetitions of each one every day as an adjunct to their Mahamudra practice to clear away obstacles and accumulate merit for their Mahamudra practice. However, if we look at the methods that 16th Karmapa asked Khenpo Rinpoche to use with his students in the West, the 16th Karmapa told Rinpoche that after his students finished the 4 parts of Nundro, the extraordinary uncommon preliminaries, they were to be given the empowerment of the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, and instructed in the Karmapakshi Guru Sadhana. The Karmapakshi Guru Sadhana is, I guess you could call it a hybrid practice, in that it is both a Guru Yoga and a deity practice in one. And in fact, because it is based on a vision that Enigma Terton had, Enigma Treasure Revealer had, it is also the unity of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. So in this way, it is the most unique practice one can imagine having. And so that's what Khenpo Rinpoche taught his students to do, was he taught them the Karmapakshi practice. And I've been studying the Karmapakshi practice for a very long time. And every time I go through the text with someone now, I learn something new about it and how amazing it is. So for those of us who have trained and studied at KTD, that's been the progression. The practice of shamatha, the practice of Tonglen, the study of the 7-point mind training, the 4 contemplations on the precious human life and so forth, and then the 4 uncommon preliminaries of the Nundro, and then after that, the practice of Karmapakshi, which includes the practice of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And it's pretty amazing, and there's a lot to explain about it. We don't have enough time to do that, but it purifies negativity and it accumulates great merit. So these two go together. And in fact, Khenpo Rinpoche, different lamas explain these two paths differently. And Kempo Rinpoche said, he says, I know that some people say that the mantra practice is just part of the path of skillful means. He said, but I think it's also, I think it's also a part of the practice of Mahamudra, rightfully, he said, because it helps facilitate Mahamudra practice. So that's a little bit about the practice of Vajrayana. It's two paths of liberation and skillful means, and how Kempo Rinpoche trained people in this progressively one by one by one. And so I know I have some questions not answered from yesterday, and I'll get to those in a minute. But I wanted to see what kind of questions and thoughts you folks might have. If anyone has a question, you can either raise your hand. Okay, yes. See if I can get that to work. Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering about all of the different paths. Will you be discussing that to come? That's my question.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And by that, do you mean the path of liberation and the path of skillful means? Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I just talked about them briefly. That the path of liberation consists of the Nundro practice, and then the main practice of Mahamudra for us. That's what the path of liberation is. And so that would mean that the path of liberation would have an 8-part preliminary and a 2-part main practice. How about that? The preliminary is common, which are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma, contemplating those. And Siddha Rinpoche gave a lovely technique for contemplating the 4 thoughts. I'll share it with you here because I feel like it's really good. A lot of people don't know how to contemplate things because we've been used to learning meditation where you just do one thing, and that's watching the breath, and you let go of your thoughts. You let go of all your thoughts in shamatha meditation. Well, in contemplation, you actually use thinking in order to come to an understanding. So when you contemplate the precious human birth, you don't just watch your breath and think, precious human birth. What you do is you think about how lucky, you think about how fortunate you are to have been exposed to Dharma, and how even though you've been through difficult things in your life, you're still here and you're still able to practice. And you can feel, as you contemplate, you might feel some gratitude for that. And that little pang of gratitude is the second part of a contemplation, because Siddha Rinpoche said a good contemplation has 3 parts. The review, where you review the idea. The second part is the recognition of the idea being true. And the third part of the contemplation is resolving to do something because of what you've understood. Review, recognition, and resolution. Those are the 3 parts. And so I use a funny example. I say it's like riding a bicycle up a hill. When you're riding a bicycle up the hill, you're really working hard. And then at the crest of the hill, you get to wait a second, and then back down the hill you go on the third side. So the review is the front side of the hill. The recognition is that moment at the top where you say, yes, that is actually true for me. I actually do have a precious human birth. And then on the other side, you think, because I have this precious human birth, I will practice Dharma, which is the resolution for all of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma. You resolve, after contemplating all of them, you resolve to practice the Dharma because of what you've understood. Okay, so that's the methodology for practicing all 4 of the 4 thoughts. You review, you recognize, and then you resolve. Then, after you've finished contemplating those, some lamas give their students the assignment before they even start their Nundro practice to contemplate one of the 4 thoughts for a week. every day for a week, for, half hour, however long you want to do it, and just over and over again, going through the process of review, recognition, and resolution. But for a lot of people, that's difficult. So even if all you can do is just meditate on them or contemplate them every day, that's good. The other four preliminaries I've just explained about taking refuge and engendering bodhicitta, sometimes accompanied by prostrations. For some people who have physical limitations, Khenpo Rinpoche had them recite 100,000 refuge prayers instead. The Vajrasattva purification, which is the 100,000 repetitions of the Vajrasattva purification mantra while visualizing the purifying of your body, speech, and mind. The third one is offering 100,000 mandalas to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on behalf of suffering beings. And the last one is reciting 100,000 prayers of Guru devotion. And so that's the preliminary. Now, the main practice of Mahamudra is divided again into two parts, shamatha and vipassana. Here's what Khenpo Rinpoche did for that. Every year in the summer, he gave a 10-day retreat. And during those 10-day retreats, he gave the instructions on the three. I don't know if he gave all three. Now, I may be wrong about that. He gave at least two of the three meditation manuals. He taught them by the ninth Karmapa. He taught the pointing out the Dharmakaya, which was the short one. And he taught the ocean of true meaning, which was the longest one. He taught both of those over several summers. And those transcripts, I believe, are still available. Of the two, I think that pointing out the Dharmakaya is the easiest for us to practice right now. The other thing, he also taught on another meditation manual. He taught on the Lamp of Mahamudra by Tsele Natsok Rangdrol. He taught on that in Crestone a number of years ago. And then he taught on the Mahamudra Eliminating the Darkness of Ignorance at Columbus KTC a number of years ago. So that's the third manual by the ninth Karmapa. So he's given a lot of teachings. And we're trying to find ways to facilitate Mahamudra instruction at KTD. We're working on that now. So in the meantime, people can work with individual teachers on Mahamudra practices once they finish. Khenpo Rinpoche cleared me to teach pointing out the Dharmakaya to anyone who had finished their Nundro. And he cleared me to teach the Karmapakshi sadhana, which has some instructions in it as well. That's why it's such a great, Karmapakshi is such a great practice, because there's very deep meditation instructions in it, and you get to actually meditate while you're doing the sadhana. It's really pretty interesting. So does that satisfy your question about how the training is done?
Yes, and I have one more if I could.
Okay, yeah.
The contemplation on samsara and cyclic existence and sort of wiring that in and cementing that. I don't know if there's anything available for that.
Well, here's the thing. What I would do is there's a new translation of the Torch of Certainty called the Torch of True Meaning. And that might be useful because there's a whole chapter on these four thoughts. And so each one talks about the, each one of these four is described. There's a whole chapter on the defects of samsara. So you can read that and it will be helpful. What Khenpo Rinpoche said on one occasion when he was teaching, he said, we have to slowly wear out our patterns of attachment to samsara. He said, you're not going to give it up all at once. He said, if you begin to look at how disappointing, how utterly disappointing it is. He said, you're going to slowly lose your taste for it. And so I think that that is the beginning. What I've noticed is that different individuals respond to these teachings differently, because the main way of contemplating the four thoughts is to remember the three kinds of suffering: the suffering of suffering itself, the suffering of change, and the suffering that is built in to samsara. I'll call it built-in suffering. Suffering of suffering itself means that when something is going wrong, it hurts physically, mentally, emotionally, pain. The second kind of suffering is the suffering of change. Yesterday I wasn't in pain and today I am. And so I would call it value-added suffering, because there's some resentment in there of suffering. And then the suffering that is built in, really, our life is, we woke up in samsara today. So what do we expect, a kind of, is the, we woke up in samsara today. Were we expecting it to be like a pleasure grove? Were we expecting everything to go our way all the time, always? And that's a little bit harder to contemplate, but but the idea is that samsara is built around dissatisfaction, because it's impermanent, and because everything in samsara is impermanent. So if we can't adapt and change, then we suffer all the time. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is. I guess I continue to suffer with the phobo, fear of a better offer, and not,
I've never heard that one. That's a good one. Yeah. I got it. So you're afraid that somebody will come up with a better offer, or you're afraid that you won't take the better offer?
Well, I guess uh, I was raised Lutheran, and so spending our precious human birth and our time in this life, my time is very limited, and I see the benefits, and I've seen it over and over and felt it over and over again of practicing Dharma, and accumulating merit versus not. And I don't know why. Maybe it's trust that this is the way we should be spending every single available minute of our time, is practicing Dharma and doing our Nundra practice. And because
Mhm.
I guess I question what comes after this life, and
Mhm.
makes
Mhm.
the energy would carry on, and samsara makes sense. But for
Mhm.
some reason, I'm about 99.9% on it, and that's
Mhm.
what I work with. And
Oh, sure. Well, I can understand that, because I think that what happens to us, I'm both happy and sorry that you grew up Lutheran. But I grew up Catholic, so we have things to talk about. And I think that what happens to us as human beings is that because we want to do things well, because we want to practice well, because we're sincere, I think what happens is that we fall into we can sometimes fall into all or nothing thinking. Like, I'm either going to become a monk or a nun, or I'm going to be completely worldly, when really there's something in between. And I think that putting that kind of choice before oneself, like, I'm either going to quit all of this and go and become a monastic and live on the mountain, or I'm going to become a completely worldly person and never think of Dharma again. It's just not like that. We're in the middle. We're in the middle. And so what I find really interesting is that one of my lamas told me once that if Dharma is never far from your mind, you're going to be fine. If you're always thinking about Dharma, it's, how did he put it? He said, if Dharma is never far from your mind is never far from the Dharma. I think it was something like that, you know, So the idea is that our lives are already flavored by Dharma in every possible way because we've connected with these teachings amazingly, and we try to think of them morning, evening, noon, and whenever we can. And so I think the main thing is to continue to do what practices we can in the time we have and to make the aspiration. Because you asked, what about in the next life? Well, that's a whole nother discussion because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, nearing the end of his life, he said, and I see I'm running a little bit over time, and we are almost overdue for our break. I see one other question in chat, so I'll try and wrap this up. So we get on our break before the bottom of the hour. Rinpoche was asked about. Oh, let's see if I'm sorry. Just I love getting older because you forget stuff. You forget where you're going with the conversation. It's so much fun. Um,
Next life.
next slide. Okay, thank you very much. Khenpo Rinpoche said in one of his talks, he said, I'm here to tell you I made a mistake. And we're all looking at each other. Rinpoche made a mistake? How is this possible? And he said, years ago, someone asked me about the future life. Is it better to be reborn with your Vajrayana master, or is it better to be reborn in Dewa Chen? And I said Vajrayana master because Vajrayana is the quick path. Dewa Chen, that's the Mahayana. That's going to take a while. And he said, I was mistaken. What's really, really weird is I might have been the only person in that large audience of 50, 60, 70 people who had actually been present when he had said that years ago. I was actually present when he said that. And because it was in Columbus, he said that. Okay, so I mean, so he's telling this group at KTD this thing that happened in Columbus like 30, 20 years ago. And it's like, wow. And he said, the reason I was mistaken is he said, I have now read all of the Amitabha Sutras, which I had not at that time. And he said, now that I've read them all and I've read the commentaries, he said, Dewa Chen is your number one choice. Is and should be your number one choice. And he said, the reason for this is very simple. He said, if you are reborn in Dewa Chen, you arise in the presence of the Buddha Amitabha, you hear his teachings and gain enlightenment on the spot, right? So he said, from there, then you can emanate anywhere, including to be with your Vajrayana master to continue your training. He said, however, if you make the aspiration to be reborn with your Vajrayana master, that means you're going to be reborn in samsara to find the master. And then he said, and in that way, once you're in samsara, he said, anything can happen. Anything can happen, you know? So he said, even falling away from the Dharma completely. So he said, I just want you to know I have corrected this mistake. And I was, it's like, wow, what an amazing thing. So he basically said, Dewa Chen's a sure thing. So for you and me, our job is to practice Dharma to the best of our ability and get to Dewa Chen. Because he said, I am going there myself. He said, I want y'all to join me there. And it's like, okay, if that's where he's going, I'm going there. Now, so that's a story about Rinpoche. So I hope that this is helpful and that we remember that whenever, even if we can't practice as much as we want, the idea that we're thinking of it all the time and wanting to do it is actually meritorious in itself. And that slowly over time, I mean, this world makes it so hard for us because we have to make a living. We have to work so hard to make a living. We have families, we have responsibilities. It's just really hard to get everything done. So we'll have to stop here on your question. I'm sorry, but I appreciate you asking. Now to go into the chat, there are two questions. The first one was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's, both Khenpo Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche taught on Khenpo Gongshar's naturally liberating whatever you meet, was the name of the instruction. It was published as a book by Trungpa Rinpoche called Vivid Awareness. And that's a Mahamudra instruction. That was the question. Is that a Mahamudra instruction? The answer is yes, it is a Mahamudra. It's a complete system right there. Everything is in that that book. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, because people were asking me, because it's divided into two practices. Khenpo Gongshar's Mahamudra book is divided into two chapters, one on the analytical meditation of a scholar and the other on the resting meditation of a wanderer. And these two chapters. And people were asking me, I don't understand. They were saying to me, I don't understand the analytical meditation of a scholar. I don't know how to do it. And Khenpo Gongshar doesn't really explain it. And I asked a Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, about this, and he said, yeah, he said, Khenpo Gongshar's notes on this, he said, are really thin. He said, there's really not much there. He said, however, the same material is covered in the Great Path of Awakening. He's, I just can't believe the use of this book. He said the same material is covered in the Great Path of Awakening under the How to Meditate on Ultimate Bodhicitta. He said there's a 4-part meditation on how to meditate on ultimate bodhicitta that's in this book. He said, if you can teach people that, he said, and it will stand in for the, isn't that interesting? So Michael, I hope that helps with your studies. Then I have one more person and watching on YouTube because having tech problems on Zoom. Uh-oh, no Zoom audio. Oh, sorry. I don't know what to do about that. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm just really very pleased that Hillary, that you joined us this morning. She says she's in Woodstock and it's snowing. Okay. Well, let's hope that everything goes well out there on the East Coast. We just got a dusting in Ohio overnight. That was it. Okay. Well, Hillary, if you signed up for the program through KTD and got the Zoom link, even if your audio is not quite working, what you might do is during the break, restart your device and see if that restores your audio. And the other thing you can do is stay tuned, because once the videos, the full videos are uploaded to the course page, you'll be able to watch everything. You'll be able to see all of the course material. So, all right. Thanks, folks. We have to take a 15-minute break, and we will be back at 1:15. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the whole idea of lineage and what that's all about. And so that's where we're going to go this afternoon. So if you have other questions, we'll be able to address them then. During the break, I'm going to halt the recording. So here goes the recording. And then the next thing I'm going to do is turn off my camera and microphone, because it does look like the YouTube stream is continuing. So unless you want people on YouTube to see and hear you, you might want to go ahead and turn off your camera and audio during our 15-minute break. See you soon. Om Mani Padme Hum. Hello, we're back. Yay. Let's see if we can get that. I'm going to go ahead and start that recording again. All right. Thanks to everybody for joining. I see a question in the chat. Let's see, a person finished Nyingma Nundro almost 20 years ago. Okay, and have Jetsun Khandro Rinpoche as a teacher. Now this person is practicing at one of the Karma Take-Some Cholings. With her blessing, repeat the first two parts of Mahamudra Nundro or do the entire thing with all four practices. Ooh, good question. I remember something that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said regarding the Nundro and the different traditions. He said, if you've done, how did he put it? Yeah, I think I think he was, I think the basics is that once you have done the Nundro, you have to go to the teacher and ask the teacher of the center where you're attending now if they want you to do any other Nundros for any other purpose. But what I will say is that Khenpo Rinpoche said something about once a person has finished the Mahamudra Nundro and done Mahamudra practice, then they can, if they have totally finished their Mahamudra studies, which to me would mean that they had received some benefit from the practice, he said they could then go and study the other traditions such as Dzogchen. So I'm assuming that the opposite is also true, that a person who has studied Dzogchen could come and study Mahamudra. I'm a little murky on what he told me about that. But here's my thinking, just my off the cuff thinking, that if a person wants to practice Mahamudra, then it would be great if they could get a reading transmission for the Mahamudra Nundro text. And if they wanted to do a little of the practice, I don't know, under whose direction you'd be working. I don't think it's necessary unless you plan to do Mahamudra practice. I guess that's a little bit confusing. I'm sorry, my dear, the lady who asked the question. Let's see, should I repeat the first two parts of Mahamudra or do the entire thing with all four practices? Well, Rinpoche said that there are some people who continue to do Nundro for their whole life. They just do, once they've accumulated the 100,000, they then do parts of it on a regular, like even daily basis, if they don't do a deity practice, and sometimes even if they do a deity practice, because the Nundro always is helpful for Mahamudra practitioners, because Rinpoche said why some people continue doing it is because it clears up way obscurations and it accumulates merit. So I wouldn't say it's required, but you can check in and see, is there something I'm missing about the question if you'd like to add to it? The questioner? Okay, I'm guessing that there's nothing to add then. Yeah, again, I'm sorry if that was a little bit jumbled, but to recap with clarity, if you've already finished one Nundro and are now practicing at a KTC center, then would you have to do the Mahamudra Nundro? And the answer would probably be no. Just to practice at the center, I'm not sure that would be necessary. But if you want to study and practice Mahamudra, there's nothing wrong with doing it. You may not have to do all the 100,000 repetitions, but you could check with the Lama there and see. And if you run into a snag and or you still want to ask questions, you can write to me. I'll put my email address in the chat here. And you can just write me a letter and we can talk more later. I have an email address at my home organization, columbuskTC.org. So that's in the chat. Okie doke. Okay. Oh, here's an explanation. A different person. Oh, sorry, not same person, different person. Okay. And Julie's asking, is there a way to ensure our arrival in Dewa Chen? Oh, yeah. There's a lovely teaching that was given by Mingyur Rinpoche, by the way, recently on this. By recently, I mean last year, where he said that there are 4 causes, and I don't think, Julie, I'm going to be able to remember all 4, but what it comes down to is you have to make the aspiration and so forth and so on. But all of it, all 4 parts are included in the short Amitabha sadhana. Basically, you just, he made a big joke in the talk about saying, I'm going to give you Amitabha's home address. And so really the way he described the 4 causes of being reborn in Dewa Chen, it amounted to the recitation of the entire short sadhana of the Buddha Amitabha. Okay. It's just, like taking refuge and engendering bodhicitta, and then making offerings, and then reciting the mantra, and then saying the prayer, to be reborn in Dewa Chen. And so that's in the short Amitabha sadhana. So you're great. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche also said in several of his talks that really you just have to make that aspiration. And I'll give the example of a friend of mine, a Dharma friend of mine, who passed away a few years ago, who was a student of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's. This person had not finished their Nundro, and they were very sad because they had a terminal cancer diagnosis, and in fact, they were in the last days of their life when it just happened that Khenpo Rinpoche visited their city. And Khenpo Rinpoche actually went to see this person who was in the hospital. This was here in Columbus at the KTC. And Khenpo Rinpoche gave this person the interview of a lifetime. 7 people were in the room, and there was no recording made. But when it was over, I wrote down everything I remembered and showed it to the translator. And the translator said it was a good record of what Rinpoche said. And Rinpoche basically said, everybody dies, but not everybody has taken refuge. And you having taken refuge gives you a source of powerful support and blessing. And he said, the most important thing right now is for you to focus on the wish to be reborn in Dewa Chen. Make that your focus of repeating in your heart, I will go to Dewa Chen. And so that was the person's practice for the remaining 5 days of their life, was just to make that aspiration without reciting a sadhana, without doing anything else. And it's very, very possible that that he ended up there because he had just a really amazing passing, and signs of success of POA and the whole thing. So I think that it doesn't. We don't really have to get too doctrinaire about it. Just make that aspiration. Yeah. Khenpo Rinpoche being there is for me the number one selling point. And before I do want to actually tell one more story that actually touches on your previous question that I think other people will enjoy. As you know, Khenpo Rinpoche was not afraid of saying what needed to be said in any situation. And one day, I don't know what inspired him to do this, but he was in the middle of a talk about something else at KTD Monastery. And he said, I wonder how many of you really want to go to Dewa Chen. He said, and I know it's hard for you to practice Dharma. He says, and I wonder, he said, if I told you that I had a bus outside and we were all going to go to Dewa Chen, like now, today, how many of you would be willing to get on that bus? And I know, right? And leave everything behind and just really just say, okay, I'm done. Get on the bus and let's go. And it was a really interesting moment of like everybody was embarrassed. They were like reflecting on, and I do think that he would bring about situations like that to help teach us something, to teach us what's important and like how important letting go is. I'll tell one other story about letting go. And this will seem totally unrelated, but it's connected to the idea of letting go of samsara. When Khenpo Rinpoche gave the Bodhisattva vow for the first time in Columbus at the KTC, we were still meeting in somebody's living room. And he during the ceremony or before the ceremony, he passed a silver tray around and said, "I would like for you to place on this tray something you do not want to give up, something that's important to you and that you don't want to give up. I want you to put that on the tray." And so everybody had to trust him that they would get those things back later, but they were not sure that what they gave him would come back to them. But so everybody, you could see like the calculus going on in everybody's mind, like what can I like do without forever if this is a forever give up, and then people put different things. I can't even remember what I put on the tray, but I'm sure there was angst. And so then during the mandala offering, Khenpo Rinpoche actually took that tray full of items, many of them jewelry, and offered it to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, for the benefit of suffering beings. And it was as though the room were filled with power and blessing and electricity almost. And then he placed the tray on the shrine and continued the ceremony. It wasn't until after the ceremony we got the items back. And so I asked him later, I said, "Rinpoche, I noticed something. I noticed you don't do that anymore. When you do the Bodhisattva vow, you don't pass a tray around and ask people to put things on the tray." And he said, "No," he said, "it freaked everybody out." And I don't want to do that again. So now, because it's my responsibility to sometimes give the Bodhisattva vow, I always tell this story. And after telling the story, I encourage them to imagine giving the one thing they don't want to give away when they make their mandala offering. So anyway, okay, now back to questions. We have I hope it's all right if I read the next question. A person says they abandoned Nundro many years ago. No meaningful relationship with the Lama. Is it okay for me to continue reading? Okay, the person, okay, yeah, very good. Okay. After some time, the practice, refuge and prostrations, felt to me that I was dedicating effort to a one-size-fits-all, ritual that was part of a long step-by-step method that was not leading to transformation in myself and others. And there was an unuseful conflation of culture and spiritual practice. Yeah, I understand. Folks paid a lot of attention to Tibetan customs that weren't leading to spiritual growth. I have done in my best for 30 years to live in direct awareness and know the nature of my mind and continue to study. I have no teacher. My training was in the Karma Kagyu, and it has always appeared to me that I cannot know the nature of it has always appeared to tell me that I cannot know the nature of my mind without Nundro. Is this your view? Well, here's the deal. What I think is that we are all on a spiritual journey. Every single one of us is on a spiritual journey. And that journey will have twists and turns. And I think that if I reflect back on Khenpo Rinpoche's, on his teachings and so forth, and the whole idea of helping people to realize their nature, I think that it comes down to bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta. And I think that bodhicitta is, he told me, was the critical component in successful Mahamudra and Vajrayana practice. And so I feel, and here's kind of my thinking. If a person has a practice that they can do that increases their bodhicitta, this is incredibly important for Mahamudra practice, and it must be done. Because if we attempt to do any Vajrayana practice without bodhicitta in our hearts, then then the Vajrayana practice will, Khenpo Rinpoche said, at best it will do nothing, and at worst it will turn us into something we don't want to become. And so that's, I guess, my main advice to anybody who's practicing Mahamudra now, with or without a teacher, is to really emphasize and focus on the bodhisattva motivation, because Mahamudra and the realization of the nature of mind is not something we're doing for ourselves. We're doing it for all sentient beings. And we accomplish, they talk about the two benefits, self and other, and oh, how interesting. A branch of my tree just fell onto my house. Hello. But it was a small one. That was interesting. I think the squirrels were jumping up and down too hard. It was just a little one, just a little branch. Okay, but it made a nice little thud. But I feel like that, to me, is the critical piece, is the bodhicitta. And the two benefits of self and other come about through the practice of bodhicitta, and being able to have confidence in the guru, which is really the point of all of the parts of Nundro, because all of the parts of Nundro are a form of guru yoga. And Khenpo Rinpoche said that the blessing of the guru is an important part of Mahamudra practice. In fact, he even gave a short guru yoga that I will put in the chat for you here. When he was teaching on Lamp of Mahamudra and Crestone, let's see if I can pull this out. He gave I believe this was in the Lamp of Mahamudra teaching. I remember getting it in Crestone, but it could have been in another circumstance. Let's see if I can find that for you. He gave a very short guru yoga that's really a good practice to do at the beginning of any session of Mahamudra practice. Let's see here, copy. Oh, well, I think that, okay, this will take a second. Here we go. Now I put it in the chat. I was thinking about this. Let's see if I can send it to everyone. I'm not sure I'll be able to send it to everyone. Oh, darn. That's not a choice for me. So I'm going to have to send it someplace. I'll send it to the person who asked the question. And at some point, we'll hopefully be able to, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put it in the, put it on the class page tomorrow. Okay, there we go. Because Khenpo Rinpoche was definite about the blessing of the guru being important for achieving Mahamudra, because it comes from a lineage of masters. So if what you can do is visualize, if you don't have a personal teacher, you could use anyone you have faith in as the guru, and see their body made of light, and pray to them, and imagine that you receive from them the 4 ripening empowerments, which is part of the Vajrayana tradition: the blessing of body, the blessing of speech, the blessing of mind, and the blessing of all 3. And then you imagine the guru dissolves into you. And this will all be explained in the Guru Yoga practice page that I post on the class page tomorrow. I'm hoping they'll publish it tomorrow, because I don't have the capacity to post anything online myself there, but the course people will do it for us. But I would say that's a good one to do, and he explains it in there. And so I would say keep up the bodhicitta practice, do whatever you can to be of benefit to beings. Even if Khenpo Rinpoche, when he was teaching about the 7-point mind training, he said that many people in Tibet would practice an offering for the world every morning. They would put incense out. It was like maybe usually little juniper branches that would be placed on the family fire, and then a prayer would go up with them, and the smoke would be imagined to be offerings for all the beings of the enlightened beings above and the sentient beings below, and that one would make the aspiration that all beings were benefited by these offerings, and that the Buddhas would be pleased and that sentient beings would be satisfied, and that and they dedicated that to the achievement of enlightenment. So hopefully this kind of practice, making offerings and doing this kind of thing, be helpful for you. And I'm so happy to know that you've been practicing all those years. That's really a wonderful thing. So thank you for your practice, and please keep going. Please keep going. So thank you. Oh my goodness. So many interesting topics now that we're in the Vajrayana, right? So many interesting topics. Well, maybe I should make a little presentation here before the lunch hour. And that was, I wanted to share something with you that is on in our prayer text that we do. And it's going to take a second for me to cue that up. You remember at the very beginning, we do the Mahamudra lineage supplication. I'm going to bring that back on the screen and show you something interesting about it. Let's see here. Try again. Let's see if I can make the Zoom do what it needs to do. Here it goes. Oh, there it is. The Mahamudra lineage supplication names the masters of the lineage: Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, and the first Karmapa, Dusam Khenpo. And when Trungpa Rinpoche gave a teaching on this prayer a number of years ago at KTD, he said these opening verses talk about the lineage of realization that comes to us today through the line of masters, beginning with the great Vajradhara, who appeared to Tilopa upon his enlightenment and gave him the essential Mahamudra instructions that we still use today. And although Tilopa, during his practice and study of Dharma, had many teachers, after his awakening and after the receiving the transmission of Mahamudra instructions from Vajradhara, he said he, at that point, needed to rely on no human teacher after that. And so his realization deepened, and he shared his realization with the Indian master Naropa. And Naropa then held that lineage of these special instructions. I think it's really interesting to think that the Buddha appeared to Tilopa in the form of the Buddha Vajradhara, blue in color, holding a Vajra and bell, wearing silks and jewels and so forth. And that this was how Tilopa experienced the Buddha Shakyamuni appearing to him in this vision, giving him these essential instructions, because the Buddha had lived, 1,500 years before Tilopa. And so the Buddha's teachings had spread throughout Asia at that point. And so it's interesting to think that Tilopa received something special, held it in his heart, and then gave it to the next spiritual generation of Naropa. And Naropa took that, practiced it, held it in his heart, and gave it to the next generation, spiritual generation, when the Tibetan translator Marpa visited him. And he then took it to heart and passed it to the next spiritual generation, the Yogi Milarepa. And Gampopa, Milarepa imparted these teachings to Gampopa, and then Gampopa to Dusam Khenpo, the first Karmapa. if you're so this is a little bit of history. These verses are a little bit of the history of the lineage and how the lineage continued. And oops, yeah. And and then it describes the 4 elder and the 8 younger lineages, which they themselves had masters who achieved enlightenment, who then passed down their version of Mahamudra practice. And so it says, those who have gained mastery of the profound path, Kaju gurus, heed my prayer, your lineage I uphold. And so the idea is that I pray to you, lamas of the past, that I may practice and hold your lineage. And this is really, for me, the important thing about lineage is the fact that it's alive, and that it's like I can use the example of one candle lighting another throughout history. One being gains enlightenment, teaches another, they practice and gain enlightenment, and then they become the candle for the next spiritual generation, and on down. And so in this way, it's alive. And there's great blessing in what's received. And this is why lineage is different than taking a course. It's very interesting since the global pandemic. We've done a lot of courses on Zoom like this one, and I'm still thinking the jury's still out as to whether sacred transmission can happen through Zoom, but my mind is open just in case. I mean, I'm open-minded. It could actually happen. I don't know. But I still love the idea that the teachings are still imparted from one spiritual generation to another, and it just keeps moving. So what we are receiving and then practicing ourselves becomes stronger within us. And so that to me, this is the most interesting thing about lineage and why it's so important to have lineage. And so the prayer says, bless me so I may adopt your ways of liberation. And then it describes the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma, just by talking about just one of them. Just as revulsion is taught to be the legs or the feet of meditation, this meditator does not cling to any food or wealth and severs all ties that bind me to this present life. And then it says, please bless me to be unattached to honor or to gain. So that first, when Trungpa Rinpoche explained the prayer, he said those 4 verses refer to the 4 common preliminaries of Mahamudra, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma. Then the next 4 are about the uncommon preliminaries of the Nundro, refuge and bodhicitta, and so on. Just as devotion's taught to be the head of meditation, continually this meditator supplicates the guru, who opens up the doorway to the trove of pith instructions, because the actual instructions of how to meditate on the nature of mind are given from teacher to disciple, from generation to generation, in person usually. Please bless me so that uncontrived devotion may well forth. So the idea here is that devotion, the word in Tibetan for devotion is mugu, which means enthusiastic respect. Having respect for the teacher's accomplishment, we are enthusiastic in following their instructions. And so hopefully that brings some benefit for us. So so those 4 lines are about the 4 parts of the extraordinary path of Nundro. The next 4 lines are about Mahamudra practice itself, Mahamudra Shamatha. As non-distraction is taught to be the core of meditation, this meditator just remains, not altering at all the fresh and pristine essence of whatever thought occurs. Bless me that to be free from thinking, there's a meditation. I think one of the earlier translations is, bless me that my meditation is free from intellectualization. And I think it's pretty easy here to see the method. He's saying non-distraction, that's shamatha. remains in the fresh and pristine essence of whatever thought occurs. And this means resting the mind in awareness, in its own awareness, from which thoughts arise. And that please bless me to be free from thinking there's a meditation. Khenpo Rinpoche, in pointing out the Dharmakaya, his version of it, he talks about the 4 conditions for Mahamudra practice to take place and be authentic. And one of them is you can't try too hard. It's you can't create a state, an imaginary state, and call it meditation. You have to really work just with your mind and nothing else. So it's really about how things are. Then he talks about Mahamudra Vipassana, or insight, just as it's taught. The essence of all thought is Dharmakaya, a basic emptiness and luminosity. Not anything at all, and yet arising as everything, appearing for this meditator as unceasing play. Bless me to know samsara and nirvana are inseparable. And so this is talking about the outcome of successful Mahamudra practice, seeing the inseparability of samsara and nirvana, that you don't have to give up samsara any longer because you recognize it and the state of awakening to be the same. That's a heavy lift, and it takes a lot of practice, but I am told it's possible. Then the last is this was not necessarily part of the original, but it was appended because it's a common prayer. In all my future lives, may I never be apart from the authentic gurus and embrace the Dharma's glory. May I perfect the qualities of the paths and levels and quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Pengar Jampo Zampo, who was a teacher of, now I get him confused if he was between the 6th and the 7th or the 7th and the 8th. He was the student of one Karmapa and became the guru of the next one. So the author of this text knew what he was talking about. So I wanted to share that with you before the break, because what we're going to be talking about this afternoon is lineage, and talking about Khenpo Rinpoche's advice about lineage, advice about choosing your practices, choosing your teacher. And if I get some time, we can talk. I'm going to start the afternoon by talking a little bit about how to get through Nondro. I think I'll start there, and then we'll talk a little bit about Rinpoche's teachings on finding a teacher, relating to a teacher, and filtering, as the one person said, filtering through all of the confusing array of teachings and so forth that are available in the modern day. So I think that's where we'll go this afternoon. Are there any questions about this part? Yes, Leona May.
Would you repeat the words about devotion? You said mugu is devotion, and that it means
I think you could spell it Mugu, mugu, because you'll see it in the text. Let's see. I can pull that back up. Actually, it's still on my desktop. Let's pull that up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. And I get because my Tibetan is kind of lousy. I know this, but I cannot remember which of the is which. But that's okay. And here it is. Mugu. Mugu. Mugu, it means one of the syllables is enthusiasm and the other is respect. And I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll just use it as a pair. One is enthusiasm and the other is respect. And Rinpoche said, we feel respect for the teachers who learned all of these things and have practiced them so thoroughly and completely. And that's what devotion really is. It's not about, I guess you could say, blind idol worship. It has to do with respecting the teacher's accomplishment and aspiring to accomplish that yourself. Does that fill your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding about devotion, and a lot of people see all of the bad things that arise from it. And yet, because it can be, it can go the wrong way. And but for the situations in which everything is as it should be, and the teacher and the student have mutual respect and so forth and so on, then it can go well. I see we have another question. Can I expand on the inseparability of samsara and nirvana? Oh, yeah. Let's go back to the prayer for that. I'm not super equipped because I'm not an enlightened being. I don't even play one on TV. So it might be a little tough, but I'm going to take a run at it. Look at it here. As non-distraction is taught to be the core of meditation, the meditator just remains, not altering. Because in order to talk about the inseparability of samsara and nirvana, we have to talk about this part first. Just remains, not altering at all the fresh and pristine essence of whatever thought occurs. Now, it's not that your thoughts are wisdom, not at all. Because your idle thoughts are just it's just the movement of your habits and your karma. But if we allow thoughts to settle and thoughts begin to quiet themselves, then we can begin to recognize that the mind is, that there's a place for us in the mind where we're not involved in what Jamgon Khantrul in The Great Path of Awakening calls when there is no involvement in the 7 groups of consciousness, meaning when we're not involved with the senses, the 5 senses, when we're not involved with thinking, or we're not even involved with the idea of me or I, the mind doesn't stop. There is its own awareness, mind's own awareness, which is always present. Remember yesterday I was talking about, not Siddha Rinpoche, Mingyur Rinpoche, talking about awareness is there always. I didn't say the last thing that he said to me. This awareness is with you always. It's there when you're awake. It's there when you're asleep. It's there when you're in a stupor. It's always there, and you can become aware of it at any time. And this is what is meant by this fresh and pristine essence of whatever thought occurs, that it's always available. You can always withdraw from fixation once you learn how to do it. You can, because that's what shamatha is about, isn't it? Withdrawing from or abstaining from fixation. A thought comes up and it traps you momentarily, and then you notice it, label it, let it go, and return. By doing this over and over again, you get better at it. And you see that when you let go of it and return, that there is a quiet freshness in your mind, and that's awareness. And then it says, the essence of all thought is Dharmakaya. What this means is not that thoughts themselves are Dharmakaya, but that this awakened essence that's within us, this Buddha nature, this awareness, is always there. And it is not a material thing. That's why this line says it's not anything at all, and yet arising in all ways. I've heard other translations that are a little clearer to me, but it's nothing whatsoever, but yet from it all varieties of appearance arise. And then appearing for this meditator as unceasing play. This is the idea. In an earlier translation, it says, for this meditator who can rest the mind as unceasing play, grant your blessing that the inseparability of samsara and nirvana be realized. And this means that if we, Jamgon Khantrul expresses it really well. For those of you who have the old copy, this is not the old copy. It's on page 47. And the new copy, it's on page 51. Jamgon Khantrul is explaining a verse where he says, this is a verse from Lord Serlengpa of Indonesia.
Turn error right around and look right in. Relax completely and rest comfortably. Not being held, they will go freely. And here's what John Control has to say about that. If you follow any thought or emotion, major or minor, and let your mind wander outward, your work is in error, and you're no different from an ordinary person, meaning a person who doesn't meditate. Turn your attention right in and look right at your mind. When you look at it, nothing is seen. Relax completely, let everything go, and rest in that state of emptiness, empty awareness. No matter how many thoughts or emotions there are, when they aren't held, they aren't grabbed hold of. You don't grab them and say, yeah, what about you? You know, when they aren't held, they go freely on their own and become the accumulation of pristine wisdom. This instruction is the essence of meditation on ultimate bodhicitta. So think about it this way. If you can do that practice, then samsara is not going to harm us in the same way as it would if we believed in the solidity of everything. Does that make sense? So you see what I'm saying? And so that's why it's saying for this meditator who rests, in this, in the unceasing play, meaning that awareness arises as appearances, and then appearances disappear and awareness remains. It's like the rising and falling of ocean waves. And if you can watch it like that, then you don't get upset whether the ocean wave looks like a monster or the ocean wave looks like a swan. You're just there watching it and being able to see all things happening in this way. You can see the inseparability of samsara and nirvana. That's what they say. Now, myself, I'm pretty confused about all this, and the only reason I can explain it is because I've heard the instructions several times. So I'm able to repeat it to you. So thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. I've got time for one more, and if not, one more question out there. Okay, here's one. Let's see. Helpful. Access to the class page. Oh, yesterday, no messages, questions, or comments appeared in chat. Except for the list of participants. Yeah, I don't know. Oh gosh. I tell you what I can do, since I'll tell you what I'll do. I have to look at the stand by. I will take a minute here to see if I can get the link to the class page. I don't know if Tashi is on. If Tashi could find it and then give it to us, that would be super. But if not,
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in chat today.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. You may have to turn off your device and then turn it back on again, because sometimes the Zoom thing is corrupted somehow and you can't expand, you can't look at chat. But if you look at the three dots in the lower part of your screen, if you are on an iOS device, like an iPad, for example, there will be three dots that say more, and then chat will appear there. On iOS devices, chat is like difficult, but on desktops and laptops, it's much easier. Oh, good. Let's see. I will send. Thank you very much for that, Leona May. And since we can't post to the whole group, let me go ahead and send to Sherry the what you just sent me. There you go, Sherry. If you can. Oh, you can't go into chat, can you? So let me send it to you by email. I happen to have your email. And I will send you, thank you.
Kathy, I did get, let's see, it seems it's kaiju.org. Is that what you're sending me?
It's a long,
I didn't get it.
Okay, I'm sending it to you by email right now.
So much.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I'm not good at these technical things. I have to do things kind of the rough way. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, yeah.
I just pulled up page 51 from Great Path.
Yeah.
And underneath it, it's one of the times that we studied, and I have something that I wrote down that you said, and I love this, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about it.
Sure.
I can wait till this afternoon if that's better.
Yeah, but go ahead and ask now, and then we'll see.
It's just, I wrote it, says, to the best of my ability, it's from you. So when a thought arises and we hold it and we react, then we have that back and forth all the time. The thought would have gone away by itself.
Right.
And then you said, and I love this, it has reached its expiration date. Do not keep working on those thoughts. And I just love that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And because when we grab something and interact with it, then we're reifying it or solidifying it. We're solidifying that thing. And it's in many ways unnecessary, to do that, right? And so if we can let go and release that, then and just let the mind rest, that's a good thing to do. I remember Kemper Rinpoche told me once, he said, it's as though you just you look at the thought and it just disappears and you let it go. You don't say, oh, I'm going to miss you, you don't do that. So I don't know if there's more that you'd like to hear about that. I'm not sure.
I just love the idea of a thought having an expiration date.
Yeah.
That was so helpful to me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, no, I get it now. Yeah. Well, sure, because what I understand about thoughts and habits, especially habitual thoughts and that sort of thing, is that really is sort of like our karma just coming to fruition over and over again. But we don't have to follow it. It's not required, It's not required to follow those. There's just no requirement at all to follow them. But because we're so used to following them, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche called this addictive conceptuality. I love it that he and the translator worked on that one. Addictive conceptuality. We're so used to conceiving of everything that we can't stop. But we have to stop. And that's what all of the techniques are for. Look at what happens at the end of a deity meditation. The end of a deity meditation, we've created a whole universe of the deity. Let's just use Chenrezig as the example. Chenrezig is visualized as being first in front of us, and then he dissolves into us and blesses us in the refuge and bodhicitta section of the Chenrezig sadhana. Then, for the rest of it, he's above our heads, and we pray to him, and we praise his qualities, and we ask for his blessing. Then he shines light upon us and all beings, and we all transform into Chenrezig, and the whole world transforms into the pure realm. And we meditate like that, thinking that all form is deity, all sound is mantra, and all thought, that is the essence of all thought, is this enlightened awareness. And that's the way the 15th Karmapa teaches us to meditate when we're doing Chenrezig. When we're reciting the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hung, we do that for the majority of the session. Lots of Om Mani Padme Hung, meditating on all forms being emptiness and appearance united, all sound being sound and emptiness united, and all thought being awareness and emptiness united. And in this way, we're practicing what Kempo Karthar Rinpoche called concordant Mahamudra. And because I did just a really short Chenrezig retreat once, and afterwards I got to go to one of Kempo Rinpoche's Mahamudra teachings at KTD, and he was talking about deity practice. And that moment at the end where you dissolve the deity in yourself and rest in utter emptiness.
And I was under the impression that that was the only Mahamudra interlude in the practice. And he said, oh no, this meditation that you do while you are reciting the mantra, form as deity, sound as mantra, thought as awareness, he said, that's actually concordant Mahamudra. And I said, well, that means that it's kind of like not actually Mahamudra. It's kind of in concordant, meaning that it's similar to. I said, does it ever cross over the line and become genuine Mahamudra? And he said, oh, yeah, of course. Eventually it does. And so I thought that that was an excellent encouragement to continue doing deity practice. Because if we look at how Khenpo Rinpoche trained students, when they wanted to learn Chenrezi, he taught them Chenrezi. Many of them he taught at the very beginning because he said Chenrezi is a great practice for developing your compassion. You don't have to like finish your Hinayana and Mahayana practice before you can do the Vajrayana practice of Chenrezi. It can be done by anyone. And that was the very first practice that he gave the Columbus Karma Take Some Choling to do as their weekly practice. That was the first one we did. And then he went on to say, once a person has started doing their Nundro, they can stay encouraged in doing their Nundro by studying the lives of the great masters and studying all of the great masters' life stories, the songs of Milarepa, the songs of enlightened women, all of these great masters, you can study their life stories and their songs, which help to inspire you and help keep you going through your Nundro practice. He also encouraged people to practice 7-point mind training while they're doing their Nundro. He also encouraged people to study 37 practices of a bodhisattva, and other related Mahayana teachings and mind training teachings during the practice of Nundro in order to help us to get through the length of the Nundro practice. And he said you could even begin to study the view of Mahamudra, not necessarily the practices of Mahamudra, but the view of Mahamudra can be studied while a person is doing Nundro. And so what I've done is that I've started working with Trungpa Rinpoche's marvelous book, The Aspiration for Mahamudra, because the third Karmapa wrote a brilliant exposition of the view of Mahamudra in a prayer called The Aspiration for Mahamudra of Definitive Meaning. And he gave a little teaching that became a small book. And I'll include that in the book list. Because that particular book is the best short exposition of the Mahamudra view that I've seen. And so I encourage people to study and read that. So anyway, sorry, I started my afternoon program already. I said I was going to start with that, but looks like we'll have to stop with that. There's a person who's commented in the chat. Regarding being free from thinking that there's a meditation, something I struggle with is the balance of practicing Dharma with learning about the Dharma. Oh, yeah. Do you have tips on how to balance studying the Dharma with practicing it? Is there a fine line between the two? I'll tell you what, I'm going to give a partial answer now, and I'll give a full answer when we get back from the break, because I see we're almost at the end time here. So, yes, it's all about balance, right? And what my thing is, if people are studying something because of an interest, and that interest doesn't take them away from their practice, then studying is good. But if studying something just leads to studying more things and studying more things and studying more things, and the practice gets smaller and smaller and smaller while the study gets bigger and bigger, then we run a risk of losing our practice completely, throwing the practice over for studying. And it says, yeah, and you're saying you struggle with the balance of practicing. I almost feel that being able to watch your mind and know what your inner motivations are, I think, right, knowing what your inner motivations are for practicing and knowing what your inner motivations are for studying, being aware of when you start becoming more, it becomes more about you than it becomes about benefiting sentient beings. Maybe other folks on the call might have some thoughts about this. And maybe what we'll do is we'll stop here and then we'll start here with this question this afternoon and see if other folks have tips, tips and hints for how to balance those two. Because for me, I have very bad eyesight, so reading is not easy for me now. And so I practice more than I study now. But in the past, it was the other way, So in any case, so we'll see if we can't start with that this afternoon. I'm going to make a copy of this question in case we lose the chat during the break. Let's see. So I'm sorry, but we will have to stop here for now. I'm going to go ahead and, I won't stop the recording until we've done a brief dedication. All I can say is this has been a great discussion. You guys are amazing. I really appreciate what you're bringing to the discussion today. This is fun. We'll get back together at 2:00 Eastern. Okay. So yeah, somebody is saying, I remember many times at Kim Rinpoche's teaching, he would say, examine your motivation. Oh man, it's like he wanted us to be aware of what we were doing all the time. It's really interesting. So, okay, he trusted us. And that's what's so interesting. He trusted us to know it for ourselves when we were getting off kilter, but he would just give us these little reminders, really stuff, really great stuff. Okay, we'll do a mental dedication of the merit for this session. We think about all sentient beings suffering all over the world and make this dedication for their relief from suffering and their freedom from danger. May all beings be happy. May all beings become Buddhas, and becoming Buddhas, may they benefit all sentient beings. We dedicate our merit for the liberation of all beings. Thanks, everyone. We'll pause the recording. Okay, take super good care, and I will see you see you at 2:00. Remember, if I don't know if the Zoom window will remain open. If it does, make sure you mute and turn off your video. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Thank you.